As the surveyor under executive order of the governor, it is my pleasure to provide to the Honorable Brian C. Kemp, Secretary of State, an accounting of the events relating to the on-site visit to the disputed Bibb-Monroe boundary on July 15, 2011. The following is a video and commentary submitted for the purpose of clarifying with historical records, as well as other evidence, the procedures which were followed by me, Terry M. Scarborough, RLS 2223, as I carried out and obeyed the executive order of the governor to survey, mark out, and define the boundary line in dispute between Bibb and Monroe counties. Further, and since the opportunity to refute the recent misguided statements by Bibb County officials has presented itself, I wish to offer this additional support to my statutory duty. I deeply appreciate your invitation to attend and to comment on topics that were of interest to you as you toured the areas that are near the site of Turrentine's Ferry on the Ocmulgee River near Macon, Georgia. At the several stops made that day, I awaited the opportunity to engage the commentary of Jimmy Preston, RLS, who was the apparent spokesperson for Bibb County. Mr. Preston was the former elected and then appointed Bibb County surveyor, who now is seemingly filling the role of expert witness and representative of the Bibb County order of thought as to the meanings found in the historical record. You may recall that Mr. Preston was accompanied by an associate and Mr. Virgil Adams, the Bibb County attorney. In my review of the events of that day, I have created an accounting of the commentary from the various participants that provided insight into the aspects that were discussed. As I begin, we start the day at the first stop. The motorcade stopped at the location where the Scarborough line crosses Wesleyan Drive, east of Georgia Highway 87. I recall that you made a visual inspection of an ancient roadbed just into the tree line along the northeasterly right-of-way margin of Wesleyan Drive. This roadbed was pointed out to you by Jimmy Preston. I recall that Mr. Preston told you that this single ancient roadbed was that of Lewis Ferry Road and also of Waller's Road. As can be seen in the following demonstration, the historical record reveals the plat by Isaac Welch, certified April 2, 1822. The 1822 plat has been enlarged with computer simulation and has been inserted into the U.S. State Plane Coordinate System, which is also controlling of my plat of survey. This plat reveals the location of Waller's Road in 1822. As is further demonstrated, it can be clearly seen that the exact location of Waller's Road is accounted for in the original field notes by Mr. Welch. The accurate plotting of Waller's Road is evident upon the plat. For visual clarification, I have highlighted Waller's Road in yellow. It will remain in yellow highlight throughout all the following demonstrations. In contrast, Lewis's Ferry Road is oriented onto the 1822 plat, as well as the current U.S. Geological Survey digital terrain model, all of which continue to honor the U.S. State Plane Coordinate System. Lewis's Ferry Road is accurately accounted for by insertion of a plat of survey by James Gordon, dated August 13, 1973. Mr. Gordon was also the former Bibb County surveyor. Here, now highlighted in blue, Lewis Ferry Road is undeniably in the location that Mr. Preston pointed out to you. However, it can be seen that a separation of hundreds of feet is evident between Waller's Road and Lewis Ferry Road in a north-south axis. Unchallenged at that time, Mr. Preston then explained that the next stop would be in an overland location some 3,000 feet away, accessible by vehicle. The second stop. You may remember that the motorcade proceeded northward along Highway 87 some 1/2 mile, then through a gate onto private property in a northeastward direction for nearly a mile along a woods road to a point where it stopped at some flagging placed by the Bibb Engineering Department a few days earlier. The gathering was told by Mr. Preston to observe an alignment of flagging that was tied on brush or trees in a northeasterly and southwesterly direction. Mr. Preston stated that the alignment was an estimation of the continuance of the roadbed common to Lewis Ferry Road and Waller's Road. I objected to Mr. Preston's assertion of that misrepresentation of the truth by stating that the route shown could be the general location of Lewis's Ferry Road, but I explained that Waller's Road, which had been surveyed and platted in 1822, is still evident to the southeast, some 500 feet away. Here, as can be seen on the 1950 aerial photography obtained from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, logging roads are evident, crisscrossing the entire area where Mr. Preston imagines Lewis's Ferry Road and a right fork of Waller's Road existed. It was then that I showed you the research report that I had prepared as an addendum to the survey report filed along with my plat. You may recall the area shown in that report, which revealed a detailed enlargement of the 1822 plat of the 13th District that was prepared by Isaac Welch, and which showed the termination of only 3 roads at the riverbank within the 13th District as of April 2, 1822. The roads were Tom's Path and Indian Trail, some 2.5 miles north of Land Lot 319, Waller's Road, shown to terminate within Land Lot 319, and Mullins Ferry Road in Land Lot 344, some 2 miles south of Land Lot 319. Based on all historical evidence, in 1822, Lewis's Ferry Road did not exist, nor did Lewis's Ferry. For the sake of clarification of these certainties, I now direct your attention to the following model of the 1822 plat overlain upon the U.S. Geological Survey digital terrain model. You can now see the 3 roads that were accounted for in 1822. Noteworthy here is that no other roads or trails terminated at the river. Waller's Road was the only road terminating at the river in Land Lot 319. Here, the pencil line is shown relevant to its coincidence with the 1822 boundary line. The third stop. The motorcade then continued northeasterly along the woods road some 200 yards to a fork. I joined you on a hike along a section of roadbed that had been a haul road for activities associated with a quarry. The haul road was prominent along a straight course toward the river at the site of the recovery of Turrentine's Ferry. As we walked, you may recall that I showed you the more ancient and scarcely visible roadbed of Waller's Road that was merging with the haul road at a point some 100 yards from the railroad. Here, Waller's Road became coincident with the haul road bed. An accounting of the discovery of Waller's Road is now seen in the following film clip. To set the stage, I am joined by Dr. Gerald Smith, Ph.D. Dr. Smith provided archaeological support and commentary for the recovery of all historical evidence. The film, taken in September of 2008, provides commentary as well as visual accounting of Waller's Road and the associated haul road that was superimposed over the last few hundred feet of Waller's Road.
Alright, now we're standing near the intersection of Waller's Road and Waller's Trail. Down toward Donner is Waller's Trail. Back this way is Waller's Road, which goes on back towards intersection of Westland Road and Turrentine Road. Shelf from the old Waller's Road here. Right here beside it. A little bit of the shelf from the old Waller's Road route right in here. right through here, sticking out from under the modern fill, and it pretty much comes up to this level now at this point.
All right, Doc. So we're seeing Waller's Road converge on this more modern road bed.
Right.
And I say modern, it's got twin 12 to 15 inch hickory trees growing up right in the middle of the sweet pine trees, so it's not that entirely modern.
It converged. I think what happened, there is some independent old railroad or potential railroad up toward the old quarry.
Yeah.
Came around, reused part of Waller's Road to get down here, and then after it was abandoned, it was graded out for a more recent automobile and truck road.
Nonetheless, it found the ancient path of Waller's Road, we feel with certainty. The fourth stop. The observers followed you to the riverbank at the site of the recovery and monumentation of Turrentine's Ferry. You descended the embankment and joined me and others on the bedrock outcroppings that defined the rectanguloid features of the slip, or ferry landing. While there, you were shown some of the various wrought iron hardware objects that were a part of the ferry mooring and stabilization, which were anchored into the bedrock along the sides of the slip area. Bibb County personnel had marked with flagging some loose railroad items clearly identifiable as railroad debris and which were not associated with the anchored items recovered as ferry remnants. This distinction was pointed out to you, and I felt that it was duly noted. The Bibb personnel had chisels and hammers with them and were heard to say that they could pry off any of the items that I had reported as ferry remnants. One or two of the prior reported anchoring items seemed to be missing since the September 2008 visits, when they were discovered in the due course of the survey. I hope that this was also duly noted. Also shown to you were the three man-made sockets chiseled into the bedrock on the upstream side of the slip, into which stood the posts that would brace the pulley pole which provided tension adjustment of the main cable. The Bibb County spokesman, Mr. Preston, claimed these sockets were not man-made, but were the result of centuries of swirling river currents that fashioned each of the three sockets. He had no comment, though, as to the exact triangular symmetry of that grouping found at this location. To do so, he would need to admit to the advantageous elements of a stable ferry cable crossing at a definite ferry landing. We now go to a film clip that reveals the efforts of my staff and Dr. Smith as we began the documentation of the artifacts that were discovered in September 2008. As can be seen, Dr. Smith uses great care in accounting for the purpose and function of the three sockets and of their association with ferry operation that he later discussed in his independent report. After ascending the embankment at the riverbank, you may recall that I showed you a large quarried stone which lay upon the ground some 10 feet easterly of the monument that I had placed on the county line 40 feet back from the riverbank. The stone was on the order of 2 feet by 3 feet by 4 feet long. The approximate weight would be 500 to 750 pounds. There were no similar stones even remotely nearby, and the unusual placement atop this high railroad fill area was given special consideration by me at the time of the survey. I explained to you that it had been brought to my attention that many times it had been the custom of railroad construction personnel to haul in such a large and distinctive stone to memorialize the location of a boundary that would be lost to construction. While the stone did not fall upon the 1822 boundary line, it was only offline some 10 feet to the southeast. We show it here as it was found in September 2008. The fifth stop. Upon return to the railroad tracks from the Ferry area, I suggested that you be shown the bolt in the creek that had been pointed out to others by then Monroe Commissioner Bilderback as a point of interest to be associated with the location of the ferry. I showed this bolt to you with the assurance that it had no legitimacy and was certainly not considered by me as a possible monument for consideration as the location of the ferry site. Again, a visual accounting of that bolt is shown now in the inset. The gathering of the concerned then proceeded to follow you and I as we returned to the Hall Road across the railroad tracks and beyond a short distance to where I showed you the beginnings of the old roadbed of Waller's Road as it began to depart away from the Hall Road, slightly to the left, where we began to find the old flagging that I had left 2.5 years prior as we had marked out that ancient roadway along with Dr. Smith. The features of the ancient roadway which remained were visible within the thick undergrowth that became too burdensome to follow. I recall that we chose to abandon continuation of the retracement of Waller's Road at that point and opted to proceed to another area of interest. The sixth stop. The motorcade then moved to a point upon a hilltop northwest of the Waller's Road retracement area to a point that the Bibb County officials had suggested. You may remember that this location was a continuation of the flagging that was discussed earlier at the second stop and was announced to be the continued route of Lewis Ferry Road and of Waller's Road by Mr. Preston. Again, I disagreed, but followed and listened to Mr. Preston explain to you that Lewis Ferry Road was so well traveled that it had caused the deepening grade that was now evident as we walked northeasterly. At a point some 100 feet into the wood line, we were shown a roadway crossing the alleged Lewis Ferry roadway. This roadway, if indeed it was a roadway, lay atop the natural ground above the roadway level of the Lewis Ferry Road some 6 to 8 feet. The crossing roadway followed a course to the east, meandering slightly as it maintained a level equal to that of the surrounding terrain. Mr. Preston then announced that it was this roadway that was the point where Waller's Road forked from its shared course with Lewis's Ferry Road, and that it proceeded to the upper location of Waller's Ferry, some 100 to 200 yards upstream of the actual location of the ferry found with my survey. Now we feature the USDA 1938 and 1950 aerial photography, which shows many logging and farming roads which indicate that the deep gorge, said to be Lewis's Ferry Road and Waller's Ferry Road, did not exist during the periods depicted on the photos. Here I disagreed and was bewildered with thoughts of where Preston may have gotten such a misconceived notion. We continued to follow the roadbed of Lewis's Ferry Road northeasterly along a widening and deepening washout that was obviously the result of years of erosive influence of runoff from what had been timbering or farming activities from the hilltop where we had just parked the cars. Preston and his associate remarked that it was the years of wagon traffic that had caused the deep gorge that they claimed was Lewis's Ferry Road. I objected and pointed out that Lewis's Ferry was only known to have been used from December of 1825, when Lewis's Ferry was established by the legislature, until December of 1827, when the legislature revoked that authorization. Again, we return to the visual proof with the terrain model overlain with the 1822 plat. We again point out that the only road terminating at the river in 1822 is Waller's Road, and that Waller's Road terminated at the location of Turrentine's Ferry as found by my survey and as shown on my plat. As we walked out onto the railroad tracks, you may recall that I pointed out that Lewis's Ferry, or even a Waller's Ferry that might have been located in this same area, did not exist until after December of 1825, some 2 years after James Whatley was paid to run the line between Bibb and Monroe counties. It is inconceivable to imagine that James Whatley, the Monroe County surveyor, would or could have begun his survey from this phantom ferry location rather than the proper point of beginning, that of Waller's or Turrentine's Ferry found with my survey and located at the termination of Waller's Road, as clearly shown on the 1822 plat. Perhaps you remember that I asked Preston's associate, how far above the river were we standing on the railroad tracks? Those who became curious seemed to agree that we were some 40 to 45 feet above the water level. Preston's associate did remark that the tracks were elevated some 10 feet above the ground level of the deep gorge claimed to be the Lewis Ferry roadbed. By doing the math, that meant that the original terrain under the tracks was some 35 feet above the river, and since we were some 100 feet away from the river, the grade for the wagons and the animals that labored with their loads was a 35% slope. We then proceeded along the railroad tracks some 200 yards to the point where the right fork of Waller's Road, alleged by Preston, emptied onto the railroad right-of-way. Again, we look at the riverbank as revealed with the terrain model. The near same slope and gradient features reported at the alleged Lewis's Ferry location are also present here. I remember that we walked down slope some 6 feet in elevation away from the tracks to the area claimed as the Upper Waller's Ferry road fork, and then proceeded back along the flagged pathway northwesterly to the alleged Lewis's Ferry road. Upon arrival at that point, I again point out that a sheer straight drop-off of 8 feet to the level of the roadway of Lewis Ferry Road was evident, demonstrating that the right fork theory of Waller's Road made no sense. That roadway would have featured an incline at its junction with the alleged Lewis Ferry roadbed. Instead, and if indeed it was a roadbed, it simply stopped at the top of the vertical embankment, as you may recall. After a bit, we then returned to the motorcade and proceeded to go around, across a bridge and through residential areas to the Jones County side of the river. The seventh stop. You seemed interested in seeing some evidence of ferry operation on the Jones County side of the river. I felt that you saw none. The Bibb contingent tried to say that animal trails, or modern footpaths by fishermen, etc., were the remnants of the old roadways leading not to Turrentine's Ferry, but to an Upper Waller's Ferry that has only now been contrived from desperation. Mr. Preston pointed out a footpath that ended at the top of the embankment, elevated some 12 feet above the water's edge. This was his mate to the Monroe side, where he had proclaimed the fork in Lewis Ferry Road that became the route of Waller's Road that led to the riverbank and the Upper Waller's Ferry landing over there. As you intently searched the riverbank area for some 200 yards, you climbed out onto rock formations that you thought would reveal something. I feel that you would agree that nothing was found. When we returned to the rest of the group, you asked me to show you the location that I felt that Turrentine's Ferry departed from so as to coincide with the Turrentine's Ferry landing that I had recovered across the river. You and I followed the riverbank southeasterly through thick underbrush to the point where I pointed out old flagging that I had left 2.5 years ago. I mentioned that this was the approximate location of the northwesterly line of Land Lot 197 at the riverbank. Land Lot 197 was owned by James Turrentine in 1822 and was the location of Turrentine's Ferry, according to the historical records. Land Lot 197 was a fractional land lot containing only 2.3 acres and having some 600 feet of riverbank frontage. Of that 600 feet, only some 100 feet of riverbank frontage remained unrestricted for ferry operation due to the shoals. Accordingly, I was able to show you the most logical place for the ferry to have embarked from. Looking across the river at the slip on the other side, I remember saying that this route for the ferry boat was unencumbered by rocks, and remarked that the route was shorter than any of the conceived routes that the Bibb contingent had showed you as possible ferry operation sites upriver. I explained that the shorter the cable, the more reliable the ferry operation. I also stated that the inside riverbank at any river bend is vulnerable to sedimentation deposits over time, and that the height of the embankment here was proof that any evidence of Turrentine's Ferry on the Jones County side would be almost impossible to ascertain due to that alluvial accumulation. I felt that you agreed, perhaps from your own knowledge of similar occurrences. As we stood there, I told of the procedure that I had used to define the area on the westerly riverbank where I had isolated my search for Turrentine's Ferry. I explained that I had begun my evidence gathering some 12.5 miles west of the riverbank. I accounted for the fact that I had gathered evidence for 11.5 miles north of the Bibb, Monroe, and Crawford County corner, and had also gathered evidence for a total of 14.5 miles east and west of that tri-county corner, and that when that averaged evidence was brought to a mathematical intersection, it would produce the best evidence of the tri-county corner location. Here we again take a graphic look at the reasoning and the evidence which is so clearly portrayed with the terrain model. The green line is the averaged north-south common line between the 12th and 13th districts, resulting from the analysis of my survey. The red line is a line beginning at the rebar found near the tri-county corner and then projected northward through the first monumented corner evidence reported by contemporary surveyors. The 1/4 inch pipe found at this location bears similar dignity as that of the rebar found near the tri-county corner. The projection of this line northward, when compared to the green line, shows an ever-widening divergence. The green line stays coincident with hedgerows, fence lines, roads, and other obvious adherence to long-standing historical acceptance of the district line. For 14.5 miles, the evidence is unmistakable that my survey has accounted for the realistic interpretation of the facts which reveal the true location of this district line and of the Tri-County corner. In our discussion on the riverbank, I then explained that once I had determined the mathematical location of that Tri-County corner, I was then able to determine the location of the penciled line on the Bear and Alligator plat from usage of the original field notes by Isaac Welch, district surveyor of the 13th District, Monroe, in 1822. I explained that those notes provided a measurement from the southwest corner of land lot 319 north to Waller's Road. It was a thrill to actually find that ancient roadbed, clearly evident at the location called for by Isaac Welch 186 years prior. I then remarked that I was also able to scale a distance from that corner northward and along the land lot line to the penciled line and to produce a coordinate there as well as the coordinate computed at the Tri-County corner. Once that was achieved, I computed the projected location at the riverbank of the end of Waller's Road. I recall that you seemed to fully understand the procedures, but you were uncertain of the trust given to the penciled line. I explained that the penciled line was merely a pointer to the area that could produce a smaller area of search for the ferry landing. I then described the successful recovery of the evidence that sealed the recovery of Waller's or Turrentine's ferry. We are fortunate here to again be able to see the graphic computer simulations that depict the reliance upon the 1822 plat and the 1867 map of Bibb County. As can be seen in this demonstration, the penciled line is revealed and is highlighted in green. The 1867 map is then inserted with precision, and its agreement with the 1822 plat is revealed. Next, we see the 1822 Bibb-Monroe boundary brought through history to modern time, with the 1867 Bibb County map fading into the 1869 map of Bibb County. Watch now as we introduce my plat of survey upon the 1869 map to reveal its precise agreement with all these important documents. We now view today's U.S. Geological Survey digital terrain model with the historic boundary shown. Let's now take a flight down the 1822 boundary to reveal the historic boundary in modern time. Here we see the Bass Pro Shop as it relates to the 1822 boundary. Returning to our riverbank conversation, I also took the opportunity to cast doubt on the rebar near the Tri-County corner. I recall telling you of the trend by all surveyors to place some prominent monument at such an important corner, one that would endure the ages with the dignity expected of such a monument. I mentioned the ancient concrete marker at the southwest corner of land lot 319 that I had used to orient the pencil line on the Bear and Alligator plat. I spoke of how visiting surveyors give due respect to such prominent markers because they realize the care and importance expended by their predecessor of properly memorializing such a corner. Such a monument is treated as more significant and therefore more trustworthy than a tiny rebar found near a landlocked corner or a district corner, but especially at a county corner. I felt that you agreed. The day ended with rain and with your appeal to the county officials to try to reach an agreement for an alternate settlement of the disputed boundary as we all prepared to leave. I have the confidence that the statutory guidance given to this due process of the people's law will be given the appropriate chance for success. The grand jury of Monroe County brought forth legal presentments to the governor for a resolution of this dispute. The governor appealed to both governing bodies to come to an agreement to resolve the dispute. They did not. The governor fulfilled his duty with my appointment as his chosen surveyor. I, likewise, have fulfilled my statutory duty. Now I wish the best for you, as you must also do your duty.